I'd like to thank the Laurel Health Planning team for inviting John and I to this wonderful celebration that we're having. We're both honored to share this time with you and your guests. I'd like to start with a little personal history. 25 years ago, I was beginning to seriously think about my own retirement. Many of my friends were talking about retiring, but the word always seemed a little foreign to me because I loved the work I was doing, and I thought, why would I want to retire from that kind of work? I went online to search for the word retirement, and after scrolling through pages and pages showing me how to spend or invest my money in a retirement community, I found one site called Lifelong Learning. Now that spoke to me. And I also knew that when I found that site, that I needed to do something very different and think about retirement in a very different way. In addition to part-time university teaching online, my wife and I built a modestly successful micro-home business, which involved authoring, producing, directing, graphic arts, publishing, and a variety of fiber and artistic initiatives. I like to call it a diverse portfolio, but it's not one that you can easily sell or transfer to others. As we both are aging, we realize that we need to manage our savings very carefully, liquidate some assets we didn't need anymore, rely on a modest Social Security income, plus our savings, and then creatively generate some additional income, and if necessary, find a way to use the equity in our home. We both came to the conclusion that because our needs had always been modest, we had few life regrets, having controlled most of our time, our personal time, for the vast majority of our professional working lives. The trade-off of personal freedom more than made up for the financial security we might have enjoyed if we had followed a more traditional employment path. We both knew what it was like to live on a tight budget, and by continuing to work part-time on the things we both loved, we could very comfortably and be very happy with our own longevity. I went on to write a book called ReFire Your Life and introduced this new concept of retirement to a large emerging audience of people in their 50s and 60s, baby boomers like myself. This was my own vision of retirement, and I was able to share it, thankfully, with thousands of people. It was retirement that brought us here today and inspired a new book that brings John and I here to talk about Join the Longevity Revolution, which, thankful to the Laurel Wealth team, you all have a copy in your bags. In this presentation, I'm going to share an overview of our concept of longevity and some recent longevity research, and finally, why it's important that we look ahead and plan for a longer and more healthy life span filled with purpose, passion, and meaning. So let's start with the question, what is the longevity revolution? All of us who are here today share one thing in common, that age is an issue of mind over matter. If you don't mind aging, then it really doesn't matter. I keep telling my wife it's weird being the same age as older people. And then she reminds me that older age isn't so bad when you consider the alternative. The word longevity itself is much more positive and dynamic than the word aging. We're all familiar that we use the word aging all the time. And since it's a fairly new concept, it's something we can all participate in actually defining. So longevity just means living longer. Now to the revolution part of our book. I want you all to imagine that by some circumstances you knew that you were given a gift of living to 100 and also being in good health. That's about 20 years longer than most current actuarial tables predict for both men as well as women. When I first approached this idea of longevity revolution, I truthfully was skeptical. Why would I want to live to 100? I'd seen members of my own family suffer from chronic diseases in their 70s and 80s. I don't like pain or suffering. I wasn't really excited. But then I was introduced to some interesting research by Brad Jensen, one of our co-authors, that forced me to re-examine and reevaluate how I looked at my own physical aging. The longevity revolution is first a scientific revolution that challenges each of us to consider we may have a longer lifespan than we thought. It's true that none of us want to grow old with dementia or some other chronic disease like Parkinson's or cancer. Well, here's some good news. You may have heard about the new drug Leqembi. It was introduced for people with mild cognitive disorders or early onset Alzheimer's. And even though we can't stop the disease from getting worse, we can now take steps to slow down how fast it progresses. At the same time, well-founded and aggressive research is taking place to try to find a cure for this horrible disease. Moreover, there's a nationwide movement to eliminate the stigma the disease brings with it and to show caretakers and family members how we can normalize interacting with people who are afflicted with Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. And then there's the research going on with senescent cells at the University of Minnesota, which targets and eliminates these dangerous cells. Senescent cells have divided for the last time, and then they accumulate in our bodies at very harmful levels. This cell accumulation causes inflammation and many age-related diseases. Geroscientists have begun clinical trials with human beings right now based on the success they're seeing in reducing or even eliminating senescent cells in laboratory animals, thus extending their normal lifespan. The ability to reduce or eliminate harmful senescent cells will likely be an important breakthrough. No, it would be a game changer in terms of the field of longevity, allowing many more people to live to a healthy 100-year or beyond life. And finally, the most advanced medical applications are in genomics, where AI is being used to analyze a patient's DNA, treat diseases, create medicines that are personalized to specific people down to the molecular level. This is sometimes called precision medicine. This development could lead to a cure for cancer or many other chronic conditions related to our own aging. All of this science and technology tells us that our lifespans will increase. It's not a question of if, but it's only a question of when. So how fast are these scientific advances coming? The truth is we really don't know for sure. But scientists and medical professionals are giving us some clues. Dr. Ken Dykewald, some of you might have heard of him of Age-Wave fame, says, and I quote, "I sit on various boards and panels with geroscientists, and I'm increasingly hearing that because of the breakthroughs that are only 10 to 20 years away, living to 110 or 120 might become commonplace." Of course, there's no guarantee of any of us getting that far, but it's exciting to know what scientists are envisioning. So now ask yourselves, how are you preparing for your own longevity? The longevity revolution is also ushering in a new frontier in financial planning. When you reach age 65, it's one thing to plan for a 15 or 20-year retirement based mainly on leisurely pursuits. It's quite another to plan for 35 or more years of healthy living beyond age 65. I like to think about it this way. Between age 65 and 100, there are 12,700 days, or over 200,000 waking hours. I don't think anybody wants to face that much unplanned time. Dr. Joseph Coughlin, who directs the MIT's Age Lab and who wrote the foreword for our book, recently made this important statement: we might need to start talking about longevity planning rather than retirement planning. Alongside and complementing these major scientific advances in financial planning considerations, the longevity revolution has the potential to be a powerful social and cultural disruptor. Why? Because these scientific advances call for each of us to deeply reflect on how we will find a purpose and passion for living a healthier life for a much longer period of time. I think one of the strongest underlying messages in our book is the concept of connectedness in the longevity revolution. For me, connection is at the heart of everything. Connection to ourselves, connection to others, connection to place, and connection to the world around us. I'd like to share another personal story. When I went to college on a full debate scholarship, my sophomore debate partner sat me down and explained that I'd be missing about a third of my classes while we traveled around the country debating. He suggested finding a friend in a common class who took good notes and then get very creative in writing my major papers. He said I should pick one topic for final papers that I could use in every class. Then the challenge was finding the connections between those topics and history, philosophy, science, and literature, etc. This practice started a quest for me, always looking for connections. And today, when a young person I know is graduating from high school or college, I give them a blank tablet, a blank journal, and tell them to write down all the connections that they make in their future studies or in their personal or work life. I've seen some incredible results of connections that they've made following this advice. And these younger connectors help me to cope with one regret that I still have. And that is that I didn't keep all those college papers and all the connections and the different connections I've made over these many years. You might want to think about how you would answer some of these connection questions. How often do you think about spending time with others? What are some of the barriers that keep you from spending time with others? And do you wish you had more time to spend with others? The longevity revolution should promote connectedness due to the need for all of us to respond to one of the most underpublicized epidemics in this country. Underpublicized epidemics in this country. And that's the epidemic of loneliness. I think Laura knows that this is an important issue, and so do I. Loneliness was only made worse by COVID. Just a parenthetical note here. Being a public health professor, I can tell you that COVID is not yet behind us. People are still getting sick and dying from COVID. And just look at the Olympics, and you can see how COVID attacked the most physically fit among us today. I hope you'll get boosted with the new vaccine before winter, and where we'll all spend more time indoors. Isn't it paradoxical, though? Supposedly, we're more connected now than ever through phones, social media, and Zoom, etc. Yet loneliness continues to rise. Among the most digitally connected teenagers and young adults, loneliness has nearly doubled between 2012 and 2022, coinciding with the explosion of social media. There are more young adults suffering from loneliness than have diabetes. But think about the disproportionate attention we pay to both of these conditions. This tells me that social media and technology are not the answers for loneliness. We argue that we need each other even more in times of change. And when we don't feel needed, it brings the potential for discomfort, sadness, and yes, loneliness. Our own Surgeon General wrote a book in 2020 called Together, The Healing Power of Human Connection in a Sometimes Lonely World. He said when we feel lonely, our bodies react as if we're lost on a tundra, surrounded by wild animals and alien tribes. And if that feeling persists, our repeated stress response can lead to anxiety, depression, trouble sleeping, heart disease, and even dementia. Now, there's a key difference between being alone and being lonely. Being alone is actually just a state. It means that you're not with another person at a particular time. Loneliness, however, is an emotion which describes a feeling of sadness attributed to not having connections. So here are some questions you can ask yourself that might indicate a condition of loneliness. Do you feel in tune with other people around you? How often do you feel a lack of companionship? How often do you feel left out? How often do you feel lonely? Now we need to ask ourselves, how can this new longevity revolution address this epidemic? In our book, we mentioned 3 areas where the longevity revolution can confront the loneliness epidemic and impact our ability for developing meaningful relationships and new connections. The 3 are work, education, and intergenerational relationships. But before we discuss these 3 areas, I want to spend a little time talking about values and the importance of developing growth values in the longevity revolution. We believe these values are foundational from which we can make decisions to connect with each other in purposeful and meaningful ways. The longevity revolution calls for each of us to deeply reflect on our own core values, especially those that lead to good health habits and the values that can enhance our own personal growth. Indeed, such values will be vital for flourishing in the longevity revolution. Of all of these core values, having a growth mindset is the one meta value that encompasses all the other values. Growth in healthier longevity, growth in lifelong and long life learning, growth in creativity and exploration, growth in passion for your purposes in life, and growth in happiness. In our book, we offer some examples of how you can identify some of your core growth values and some tips on how to create new ones by developing goals for a longer life. We'll talk more about this in the breakout sessions. Here's a quick test for you to think about your own core growth values. I want each of you in your minds now to pick out a core value you currently have. And I'm going to ask you some questions about that value. Everybody have a core value? Okay. Is your core value something that you've held for a long period of time? Was this value chosen from clear alternatives, unlike going down a supermarket cereal aisle and choosing between 15 different brands of cornflakes? And if someone challenged the validity of your core value, would you be willing to defend it publicly? If you can answer yes to each of these questions, you're probably looking at a personal core growth value. Now, I want to get back to those three ways that we can confront loneliness that I mentioned earlier: work, education, and intergenerational relationships. And I want to show through each of these how we can promote a more positive sense of connectedness as we extend our lifespans. Let's start with the subject of work. The first thing to consider is whether or not you like the work you're currently doing. Some of you, even if you're retired, are probably doing something. Do you like doing that? If you do, then why should you quit doing that? Staying in your work keeps you in contact with people of different ages and backgrounds, and it offers a lot of opportunities to stay connected. As a part-time online professor, the average age of my graduate students is 35 years old, and 65% of them are women of color, and many come from different parts of the world. Because I teach online, I can be teaching in Nigeria and in Haiti and any other place in the world. I can tell you how these students have enriched my life, and hopefully this enrichment has been mutual. This is something I really enjoy doing, and there's no reason for me to quit as long as my brain can stay engaged and as long as my eyes can still see my computer. But working later in life might mean a career change for some of you, even in your late 50s or 60s or 70s. But with the birth rate decreasing and healthy longevity increasing, the world is going to need a legion of older workers to fuel economic growth in the decades to come. Those of you who work beyond age 65 will not only enjoy the benefits of more income for a longer period of time, but as I said, the social network co-workers provide and the intellectual stimulation that comes with such work cannot be underestimated or undervalued. When it comes to education, there are two different kinds of education we consider in our book, Join the Longevity Revolution. They seem like the same thing because they use the same words, but they're actually very different. The first is lifelong learning. I'm sure you've heard of lifelong learning because the term is already well established in our culture as a way to enrich your life. It's a broad category that involves things from university to seniors, to community education programs, to book clubs, things like Rhodes Scholars, trips where lifelong learning is the purpose of the travel. The new piece to consider about lifelong learning in the longevity revolution, however, is that this learning might become a matter of necessity rather than merely a leisurely pursuit because it may well involve you upskilling or reskilling in order to stay or advance in a career long after the traditional retirement age of 65. The other kind of education we consider in the longevity revolution is long life learning. Chip Conley, the founder of the Modern Elder Academy, co-authored a white paper on the concept of long life learning. The distinctive features of long life learning have more to do with growing as human beings than growing in subject matter knowledge, which is the foundation of lifelong learning. According to Conley, these features of long life learning have to do first with personal and well-being and fulfillment, which include a growth mindset that we talked about before, the idea that skills and abilities aren't set in stone and can be grown. It also includes the ability to navigate some of our difficult life transitions. And secondly, it has to do with the importance of purpose in our lives, and whether that purpose is professional or whether it's purposeful. The Japanese have a word for purpose, ikigai. Some people can immediately identify their purpose for living, while for others it takes some time and effort to do that. Almost all the discussions of ikigai seem to presume that purpose is singular, that knowing your purpose for living means identifying only one thing. That may be true for you, and if it's true for you, fine. Others, however, might have more than one ikigai. They might have what we call, in Join the Longevity Revolution, a purpose portfolio. The key for longevity planning is to identify your ikigai, whether it's singular or plural. In our breakout sessions, we'll talk about goals that you can create to help fulfill your life's purpose, or ikigai. The third area of our book covers how to build more connectedness through intentional intergenerational relationships. I want to focus for a minute on the word intentional. We all interact with people of different ages every day, as we're doing right now in this room. Now, what I'm about to share is how much more meaningful it is if we can make these connections intentional. This topic is something near and dear to my own heart. And for the past 25 years, I've been traveling across the United States, in Mexico, Canada, and England, bringing generations together and helping them work together to find common solutions to problems that they have identified. I've conducted these cross-generational conversations in faith communities, corporations, labor unions, educational institutions, and community organizations. I've done this work because 25 years ago, I wrote a life mission statement. For the rest of my life, I will work to improve relationships with all living generations anywhere in the world. That was my life mission statement, and that was 25 years ago. So every year I sort of make a note of what I've done to fulfill that life mission statement. I can't help remember a story that Rosa Parks shared with me. One day she was walking home in Detroit when she was mugged by a young 18-year-old black man trying to snatch her purse. She yelled at him, "Stop, I'm Rosa Parks." And he told her, "I don't care who you are, lady, I just want your purse." "Jim," she said, "that young man didn't know who I was or what I had done with my life." It made me realize, she said, how important it was to share our history with younger generations. I strongly believe that longevity planning needs to involve thinking and acting about your longer life connected to all living generations. Perhaps the easiest way to build intergenerational relationships is in your own extended family. For example, on Sunday night, I make a list of 5 people in my family who represent as many generations as possible. During the week, I try to connect with each person and have a conversation with them about their lives. What are they following in the media? What do they see as important issues that they're dealing with? Do they feel they have enough support in their own personal networks? I promise you, by adding your own questions, it will be easy once you actually start this conversation. You can also build intergenerational relationships through existing programs. If you belong to a religious community, and many of us do, you can just start the conversation there. Find someone older than you or younger than yourself and just begin a conversation. I like to find interesting people older than myself so that I can look for role models for how I want to age. It also makes me feel younger. You don't have to go down the shelves of the Walmarts to feel younger. Just always find somebody older than you, then you're always younger than they are. Other possibilities are intergenerational programs run by your local school district. These programs can include mentoring students, helping with study skills, or participating in some form of academic or athletic coaching. You could also call an assisted living facility or a nursing home and ask about some volunteer possibilities. Do you know how many times the average nursing home person gets visited every year in this country? Twice. So just doing that and making that connection is a valuable way to enhance connectedness and to improve intergenerational relationships. It's deplorable how few people visit nursing homes every year. And you might be surprised at how much you can learn from even these small conversations. I've talked a lot about longevity today, but I want to offer you a different way to look at it. If we live more positively and turn up the volume on our lives, the science tells us there's a good chance we'll live longer and better. But we don't want to just mean that we just live longer. The longer I live, the more I realize that my own longevity isn't just measured in years, but it's measured in moments. The lead character in a TV series that I like called Irrational puts it this way: our moments are the ones we treasure all the more because, like our lives, they're fleeting. And in the end, who we are is greater than the sum of all the choices we make in all of those moments. Longevity should be measured by meaning and by the impact we have on people's lives that we touch, like our families, our friends, and yes, our clients. I've just lost my place here. And remember, when we touch someone in a positive way, you not only touch them, but everyone else that person touches. And suddenly we can all make a significant impact on our world with just one positive touch. Please remember, growing older is a privilege, and it's denied to many. I hope for all of you a long and meaningful life with many rich and significant moments. And please think about becoming a participant in the longevity revolution. Thank you.